Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros podcast. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined by my friend PJ Glasser from Game Day Garage and Hoops in 5 with PJ Glasser. PJ, it is one of the best days of the year, which feels very strange to say to some people because we're not actually celebrating games being played. There, of course, were conference tournaments wrapping up today. But what makes it one of the great days of the year is getting a bracket. I know it is killing you. You don't have a physical copy of a bracket in front of you. We will have to make do. How are you doing on this Selection Sunday?
Doing great, Worm. One of my favorite days, man. Like you said, all the hypotheticals are out the window, all the bracketologists and trying to figure out where your team's going to play, who they're going to play, all those sorts of things. We finally have it. I think for the most part, like the committee did a pretty decent job, right? Like it feels like every year there's kind of an egregious error. Last year they had Gonzaga's an 8, right? Like there's always one of those where it's like, what are we doing? Thought maybe like St. John's was potentially a little low at 5. I thought maybe you give them a 4 for winning the Big East and beating the UConn like they did. Outside of that, though, like they put Miami of Ohio in, obviously the right move. All the bubble teams, like no real arguments. Texas, maybe NC State being one of the last 4 in was a little bit surprising, but certainly a team that I thought was going to be in the field. So that's my kind of big overall takeaway is like, I'm glad that we don't have any crazy teams that are underseeded, overseeded. It feels like every team is for the most part pretty properly seeded. Everything we thought kind of going in where they would be, they are. And I think we're going to have ourselves a great tournament, my friend.
It feels like to me, and you were doing a show with Game Day Garage, live with the bracket reveal. So I don't know how much you were looking at Twitter. It felt to me like this was the least talk of snubs I had seen in a long time. I don't recall the last time that everybody was kind of like, yeah, they kind of got it right. Like there was definitely talk about St. John's being, a seed line or two too low. Vanderbilt as a 5, I know got some discussion as well. But like a couple of seeding, question marks being the real big talking points on Selection Sunday is unusual. They pretty much got the teams in that should have been in, which partially does speak to how weak the bubble was, right? There's not a lot of teams out there that you want to be making strong cases for that should have been in instead. It's going to be a fun tournament for sure. I do want to let everybody know, if you think you know college hoops, take your bracket knowledge to the next level with the brand new NCAA Tournament Pick'em contest. Pick your winners or make your predictions against the spread all tournament long for a chance to win signed jerseys, free annual Betting Pros subscriptions, and Fantasy Pros shop store credit. The best part, it's completely free. Enter now at bettingpros.com/pick. Again, that's bettingpros.com/pick. The contest begins on March 19th. So yeah, kind of like these initial thoughts on the bracket. It looks pretty good. Do you feel like, and we've talked kind of previously, PJ, about the top teams being very strong this year. Do you feel like the field as a whole is particularly strong? Is it particularly deep? Is it particularly weak? What adjective kind of comes to mind when you're like not talking about the best teams, but talking about all 68 as a whole? Does this look like a strong field or a weak one?
It looks like overall a weak field, I would say. And I think there are certain regions that they've really there are certain regions that are stronger than others. Like before they reveal the bracket, there are certain teams that you kind of have in your head that you're intrigued of betting, right? There are certain teams that you're like, if they get the right path, I could see myself picking them to go far. And I feel like a lot of my teams that I was kind of eyeing are all in the same 2 regions. It's just like the way that it works sometimes. So that part of it's kind of annoying. It's been talked about ad nauseum of how weak the bubble is, and there's really no way of arguing against it. I mean, this is a very weak bubble. 18 and 16 Auburn was in consideration. Forget one of these final spots. So I think from that standpoint, it was weak. But Worm, I mean, if you just look off the KenPom ratings and these teams, their net rating, I mean, we got 3 teams that are above 37, which is just like crazy. It's the most it's ever been. There are 20 teams that are above 25, which I believe is the most that there's ever been. So it was a top-heavy tournament last year. I think it's a top-heavy tournament again. With that being said, I think the 2, the 3, the 4 seeds are a lot more gettable. We also have a lot of teams that are dealing with big-time star injuries in that 4, 5, 6 seed range. So overall, I would lean towards the weaker side. But there are a lot of good teams, and I like a bunch of these mid majors as well. I think we got a lot of solid mid major teams.
It does feel like injuries could play a role in the tournament. Like obviously, Michigan has lost firepower. Duke doesn't have some of its best players, and those are 2 1 seeds. Obviously JT Toppin with like that. Texas Tech could have been a team that people would have been excited to see make a run. Probably not going to now. Like it feels like whether it's players that are just banged up or guys that are out, for the rest of this tournament. Caleb Wilson with UNC, another one. Like that this tournament will be shaped somewhat by players who aren't actually on the court.
Yeah, definitely. And it's going to be interesting to see how those teams are viewed in the betting market, right? So you take Texas Tech, for example, who's going up against Akron in the 5-12. I think Akron's going to be a popular upset because people know that Texas Tech is missing Toppin. BYU without Saunders, I think they're going to be a popular upset pick, whoever they get in the play-in game. North Carolina with their injury with Caleb Wilson. So I think all those teams are going to be popular teams to lose in the first round. I think maybe 1 or 2 of them could, but you're right. Injuries are certainly going to play a part. And then to the top teams, I mean, Caleb Foster, this injury with Duke is huge. Kaysen, the injury with Michigan, they haven't quite looked the same since he's got hurt. So not only is it the big stars that are out for some of these 4, 5, 6 seeds, but it's obviously some of the top teams in the country that are dealing without some of their key players as well.
I didn't actually sit down and do the math here. I know last year the top 4 teams, the 1 seeds last year were the strongest by KenPom net rating ever. This year, I'm just looking at it here. I can't do the math that quickly. I don't know if they are better than last year, but they are at the very least very close. As you mentioned, 3 teams over a 37 net rating on KenPom is ridiculous. Obviously, 2 of these teams are the same 1 seeds as we had a year ago, Duke and Florida. Last year, Houston, Auburn. This year, Arizona and Michigan. Do you feel like this year's 4 as a group is stronger or weaker than last year's historically strong group?
No, I think last year's is stronger. That Duke team that lost to Houston, I still think was the best team in the country. They gave that game away late. I think that team was terrific. The Houston team last year, I think, is better than this year's. Florida's team last year, I think, is better than this year's. So right there, I mean, all 3 of those teams who again are in consideration. I think the teams last year are better than the one this year. And then Auburn was a really good team, and they remind me a whole bunch of Michigan. We were talking about that when we were doing the conference tournament previews. I mean, the parallels were like how those 2 teams both started the season, how they started conference play, how they kind of finished the regular season, conference tournaments. Like it's just Michigan's giving me Auburn vibes. So I think because Michigan's Auburn and then, the other 3 teams, I think Arizona's really, really good too. But I think the other 3 teams, Duke's team was better last year, Florida and Houston, as I was mentioned. So I think last year's ones are better than this year's.
The last kind of overall point I want to make quickly before we get into more of a region by region breakdown is it feels like a year of defense, particularly at the top. You just look at the defensive rating on KenPom of these top teams. Duke's number 2 in the country, Arizona 3, Michigan number 1, and Florida's number 6. And then number 5 and 6 on KenPom overall are Houston and Iowa State. Those are numbers 4 and 5 in defense. So the top 6 teams in KenPom are the top 6 teams in KenPom's defensive rating as well. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes there are years where offense is more of a driver or teams that are balanced. It does feel like defense has been a real driving force of the best teams in the country who are quite good, even if maybe the top 4 just a hair down from last year. Still a very strong group, of course. Do you feel like the defense is that an angle that you're paying attention to in this tournament, whether it's betting unders or just like in trying to pick upsets because a lower scoring game, more inherently fluky, any angle with the defense that is catching your eye in terms of how you're projecting the bracket to actually play out given those numbers?
Oh, I think having a great defense is totally key, especially in a tournament setting, in a one and done, survive in advance. It's a lot easier to win a game in the 60s than it is to win a game in the 90s, right? If you're a team trying to win 6 games and go 6-0, you're not going to score 90 points every single game. You got to find ways to win in the 60s and the 70s. So that's why all those KenPom trends of the teams, you got to be top 40 offense, top 20 defense. It's because, those teams are good defensively when they have an off shooting night, when they don't hit their season average, they can still find ways to win games. So it would make sense that, the 6 best teams in the country are all the 6 best defenses, because those teams have won a lot of games and they can win a lot of games in a lot of different ways. Even when their offense doesn't show up, they can still win games with their defense.
If you want to build the perfect bracket and take down your pool, use the free bracket optimizer at bettingpros.com/bracket. Optimize your picks using advanced data and betting odds. Lock in your favorites, and we will do the rest. Find key matchups and smart upset picks instantly. Make your best bracket at bettingpros.com/bracket. All right, PJ, we're going to go region by region. I might have asked you this last year when we had this discussion. I don't recall if I did, or if I did, I don't recall the answer. Are you when you're filling out the bracket, an all down the left side, all down the right side guy, or are you a upper left, upper right, lower left, kind of working your way around the order of the 1 seeds? How do you fill out your bracket?
I'm all down the left and then all down the right, but I fill in. So the first region this year is the East region. I fill out that entire region first, and then I go down to the next region on the left side, fill that out.
Full region, not round by round. Okay.
Correct.
We do approach this differently. I think we can work through it here for this show, though. We will start with the East and the number 1 overall seed, Duke. Some of the other teams here, UConn is the 2 seed, Michigan State the 3, Kansas the 4, St. John's, as we mentioned, kind of a surprising 5 there. Ohio State, TCU, a team that you talked about during conference tournament, our preview episode last week, as a team that you said keep an eye on them when the bracket comes out. I know you like them. Some real coaching powerhouses in this region.
You ain't kidding.
I mean, Bill Self,
talking about Hall of Famers,
Danny Hurley. I mean, it is Rick Pitino. I just let alone Duke. So when I read through the names in this region, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Is it the coaching? It is the coaching. I can see you nodding your head.
I mean, 100%, right? Like, they read off Duke. We knew that was coming. They were the number 1 overall seed. Ohio State, TCU, and then you see St. John's, and you're like Pitino, and then you see Kansas, and you're like Bill Self, and then you see Michigan Izzo, and then I mean, it's like, goodness, you're just throwing all the best coaches in the country in the same pool. Pretty crazy. That definitely is what stood out. Worm, I think this region has the potential to be the most chaos of all the regions this year. I really do. A lot of people, I think, even with the Caleb Foster injury, look at Duke, and regardless of who was in Duke's region, they were always going to put him to the Final Four. That could certainly be the case. I think the round of 32 matchup potentially with TCU could be very tough. I think the potential Sweet 16 matchup with St. John's could be very tough. If they get by those, I think they'll be okay. I don't think there's anybody on the bottom side of that region that is going to be able to beat Duke. I don't think Michigan State could, or UConn could, or any of those teams. But TCU, we did talk about them when we were previewing the conference tournaments last week. And, I'll say it again for people that didn't listen to that episode, but TCU this year is just one of those teams that have played to the level of their competition. And they were so good on neutral floors, right? If you go back and look earlier this season, they lost to Michigan by 4. Back when the Wolverines were unstoppable, they beat Florida. They beat Wisconsin by double digits. Everybody's probably going to have them as a sleeper in this tournament. I mean, they were beating a lot of the top teams in the country. And Duke, without their point guard, man, I think all of us that kind of watched the ACC championship, they were able to win, but Florida State gave them a game. Virginia in the ACC title game wasn't easy. Clemson doesn't have enough offensive firepower, but TCU, even in Big 12 play, they beat Iowa State, they beat Texas Tech, they lost on the road to Kansas by 4 in a game they should have won. They played them tough the other night in the Big 12 tournament. So I wouldn't be shocked if TCU pulled off the upset. We all know guard play this time of year is everything. And Caden Boozer got some big experience in that ACC tournament, but man, I think the Big 12 is the best league in college basketball this year. And I think TCU, with how good they were in the non-con and how tough the conference schedule is and playing all those big boys, they facing Duke is going to be nothing they haven't seen. They've played Arizona, they played Houston, they played Iowa State, they played all these great teams. I think they got a shot to give Duke a real game. And then St. John's, if they're able to get Duke again without the point guard, Worm, Rick Pitino, how many coaches do you hear across any sport, football, basketball, whatever it may be, is you always try and take away the best player, right? But it's easier said than done. You watch the Big East championship when St. John's played UConn. They completely took Braylon Mullins out of that game. Rick Pitino talked about it in his post-game press conference. They didn't even want him to breathe. They didn't even want him to think about shooting. And I look at their draw. I think Northern Iowa is a great matchup for them. I think they'll get past them. I think, even though Darren Peterson might be the number one pick, it's going to be the same kind of philosophy where, Peterson's the guy. You make everybody else beat you. And with Kansas really not having like a primary point guard against a defense like that ball pressures you like St. John's does, I think that's going to be a big issue. And then, oh, by the way, if St. John's faces Duke, they're going to be without Caleb Foster and their point guard. That could be some issues. So, it's funny how certain teams win their conference tournaments and everybody just wants to bet them in March Madness, and others win their conference tournaments and the chatter kind of quiets down. Last year when St. John's won the Big East, everybody wanted them, right? They were the 2 seed. Everybody was in love with that team. They lose in the round of 32 to Cal and Arkansas. This year they win the Big East regular season and they win the Big East tournament because they're in Duke's region. Nobody's really talking about them. So I think, look, Duke's going to be the favorite in both of those games. They're going to be favored by double digits in both of those games. There's a good chance they win both of those games. But TCU and St. John's, I wouldn't be shocked if they beat them. And then if that happens, Worm, again, the chaos, because on the bottom of this region, dude, I think South Florida's got a chance to make a Sweet 16. Louisville hasn't been able to beat a good team all year. I don't like this Michigan State team. UConn, it's funny. I actually have UConn in my Final Four in this region, and I don't even like UConn all that much. But it's just the way that it worked out.
There also is something, and I know this isn't the way you're thinking about it. There is something to like. We've seen this happen before. Let's just write UConn in there. Actually writing UConn's name in the Final Four feels correct because we have seen it happen, even if it's maybe not your favorite version of the Huskies. I think the individual talent in this region is really interesting. You mentioned Darren Peterson, might be the single most talented player in the country in terms of NBA stock. You mentioned could be the number one pick. Would your jaw be on the floor if he just went on a crazy run? Maybe, based on what we've seen, in terms of the level of commitment and the injuries and just everything that's a conversation for a different episode. But everything that's gone into his season, Donovan Dent in UCLA, there's some really good individual players here, some good guard play in this region. Can you just quickly take a few seconds? Why is St. John's, who won the Big East regular season and the Big East tournament, 3 seed lines lower than UConn, who are in the same conference and won neither?
Yeah, see, that's another thing I didn't like either. Maybe that was my one gripe is they were underseeded, and also the fact, or they were underseeded, and also the fact that they put them in the same region. These are the 2 best teams in the Big East now. If it plays out the way that I'm going to have it on my bracket with St. John's and UConn round 4 in the Elite 8, that wouldn't be terrible. I think a lot of us would sign up for that. But I was just surprised they put them in the same region. I think it's because of the non-conference. UConn, they won at Kansas. They beat Florida. They had some good wins where St. John's really kind of struggled. They lost to Bama. They lost to Auburn. They lost to Tennessee. They really struggled against some of those SEC teams. So that's what it really came down to. Even though they had the 2 wins against UConn, they did win the Big East regular season title. They won the Big East Conference tournament. I think when the committee looked at that non-conference, the disparity between the 2 was the reason why the Huskies got the 2 and St. John's got the 5.
I want to incentivize teams to play tough, fun, non-conference schedules because it's just good for the sport to have those big matchups in November and December. At the same time, I think UConn's a better team than St. John's. St. John's beat them. They won the conference that they're both in, and they won the conference tournament. At a certain point, your conference play has to mean something, right? You're in the same tournament, playing the same opponents. I don't like that. I'm not even saying that St. John's should be higher, but 3 seed lines lower feels incorrect in looking at it, which again is not, I'm not going out on a limb saying that.
You like Duke in this region, or are you like me where you think that maybe we could see some chaos?
I think it's really funny. There's always a region of death, right? Which by the coaching acumen could be this region, if that's your metric for that. But there's also always a region of chaos, and it almost feels like it could be both here. I don't think Duke comes out of this region. I don't know who I want to put my
That's
stamp
what's
on
the tough part.
instead. Like I feel like pretty okay, as okay as one can feel saying I don't think the number 1 overall seed is getting out of their region. That's how I feel about this, current version of Duke. And yet I'm like, I don't know. Like, again, the Kansas has been such a disappointment this year. UConn is not my favorite UConn. I think if forced to pick, I would pick one of the Big East teams. I would pick either St. John's or UConn. Of course, we have a few days for me to tinker with my bracket and come away with a different answer. And just really quickly, and we won't spend this long on each region. This one just has a ton of really fascinating teams. Really quickly before we move off the East, why do you not like this Michigan State team? Because I think there are some people who do like this Michigan State team. And of course, the Tom Izzo of it all, March is his specialty. Why do you not like the Spartans?
It's more so I just don't like the Big Ten. And I think as we go through this bracket, a lot of people will start to get that feeling that I'm fading a lot of these Big Ten teams. But Worm, I mean, all of us that watch college sports every year, when it's like 7 p.m. Eastern on Thursday or it's late in the day on Friday, we all see that graphic of, the ACC's 6-1 today. The Big 12's 5-0 today, right? So a lot of times these conferences, they either struggle or they do really well. I kind of tend to think the Big Ten's going to struggle in the tournament this year. And even though Michigan State's offense has been better this year than it has been in the last couple of years, I don't know if they have enough shot creators. When they get late in games, even though they were good down the stretch in Big Ten play. Again, now that you're out of your league, you're going in the non-conference, I think it's going to be tough. They do have a nice little region down there, like Louisville is a 6, no. And then, UCLA, they just beat you, so I'm sure they would like to see them again. UConn, they could beat them if they play well. But yeah, it's more of a Big Ten, honestly, than it is Michigan State. I like them more than some of the other Big Ten teams, but as a whole, I think Michigan State's going to be grouped in with those Big Ten teams I'm looking to fade.
Last Big Ten team, at least of the current Big Ten teams, to win a championship.
I
hold up my sweatshirt here for the YouTube audience. They're, of course, not in the tournament this year because they were very, 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 very far from the bubble.
Are you a UMBC guy this year, this tournament?
Why not? I hadn't really given it much thought, truthfully. we'll, maybe they can do it again. All right, we are going to go the order I like to fill out my brackets. We're going to go to the West region here. 1 seed is Arizona, Purdue, the 2, coming off the Big Ten conference title, Gonzaga, the 3, Arkansas, the 4, Wisconsin, you mentioned, is probably a possible sleeper for a lot of people, is the 5. BYU, with the other potential number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft, AJ Debonsa, is the 6. Some other names here: Miami, Missouri is an interesting one. High Point going up against Wisconsin. Villanova, Utah State is the 8-9. Texas and NC State is the kind of play-in for the 11 seed. I feel like... So last year, going into the tournament, the team I really wanted to pick was Florida, but I felt like I started to hear a lot of people picking Florida, and so I didn't because I wanted to differentiate from what everybody else was doing. I'm starting to feel that a little with Arizona, and I think the reason why I see so many people say Arizona is because of the 1 seeds, who are all very strong, they just feel the safest. It is very easy to paint a picture of why Duke might not make the Final Four. It's very easy to paint a picture for Michigan. Florida just got their doors blown off in the SEC tournament. Arizona is the 1-1 seed where it's like, I'm just really confident this is a really, really good team. I'm not saying there's some historic juggernaut, but there's just not, it's much harder to paint that picture than I think it is for the other 3, which is why I think a lot of people are going to be picking them. And while there are some strong teams, there's a lot of high ceilings, I think, in their region, but it's not like this overwhelming region of there's not a ton of dominant coaches in here. There's not teams that have been good start to like Purdue is playing well right now, like, winning the conference tournament, and obviously have a ton of talent and some great players, but they had a lot of real down stretches this year and come from the Big Ten that you are, down on. Arkansas, Acuff's really good. It's a flawed team. Gonzaga, this is not the Gonzaga we've seen the last, half decade of dominance. It's a different Wisconsin team. It just feels different as a Wisconsin team than the last couple of years. So you're running through the list. Villanova, I don't believe in, as a potential 8 to give them a game in the second round. So I almost want to be like, stop me when you hear a team that you think can upset Arizona. It just, that to me is the easiest 1 seed to pencil into the Final Four, in my opinion.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm a little higher on Purdue and Gonzaga, it sounds like, than you are. I still like Arizona to come out of the region. I think this is the region where maybe we could see the most first round upsets potentially. I think High Point's got a great chance at beating Wisconsin. I think the winner of Texas NC State's got a great shot at beating BYU. Don't think Hawaii can beat Arkansas, but it certainly would not shock me if they do, because the Arkansas defense is not very good. I'm higher on the Zags and Purdue, though. Purdue, the reason we talked about it last week, I bet them to win the Big Ten Conference Tournament. They were just a team that needed to get out of the regular season. They just needed to get away from Mackey Arena. As crazy as that was, they could not win any big games at home. And with all the experience on that team and all the games that Smith, Lawyer, Kaufman, Wren, these guys have played together, I mean, this is what they've been waiting for. It's this time of the year. They wanted to win a Big Ten championship, and they wanted to win a national championship. So I just told you I want to fade a lot of these Big Ten teams. Purdue's normally a team that you want to fade in March with Painter's track record, but I think they're very intriguing this year. I also think Gonzaga is intriguing, man. I mean, we talked about it last week, but Mark Few's got a better defensive team than he does offensive team, and we don't know what that looks like in March. One thing that also never gets talked about with Mark Few is what a great early round tournament coach he is. Like his team, I think he's made it to 9 or 10 straight Sweet 16s. And usually Gonzaga's got 1 and 2 seeds. But again, we've seen some 1s, some 2s, some 3s go down here in recent years. Gonzaga's never in that mix. They're always good to win usually the first 2 games. I think they're going to be able to do that again this year. And the underrated thing with Gonzaga is one of their best players, Braden Huff, has been out for 2 months. He should be back for the tournament, which is going to help them along with EK and give them one of the best front courts in the country. All going to come down to the guard play for Gonzaga if they knock down their 3-pointers. But they're one of the oldest teams in college basketball. They're really good on defense. And I think that Gonzaga-Purdue Sweet 16 game is going to be sweet. I think the winner of that game is going to give Arizona a heck of a game in the Elite Eight. But I tell you what, Worm, it just feels like it's setting up for Arizona Gonzaga, because then we get the Tommy Lloyd Mark Few storyline, and we get the student versus the teacher. And Tommy Lloyd, how fitting would it be? He gets to his first Elite Eight, and who does he see there on the other sideline but his boss for so many years? So, I talked about at the start how there were certain regions with some teams that interest me, other regions with some teams I didn't want anything to do with. Gonzaga and Purdue were some teams that I was hoping to be sprinkled in elsewhere where I could take a shot with them. I didn't want them to be in Arizona's region. So I think one of those 3 is representing the West. I don't think Arkansas, Wisconsin, even though some people could look at those teams as sleeper, high upside Final Four, I really think it's going to be one of the top 3 seeds. But Arizona, you said it really well. They just do feel the safest right now. They were so good in the non-conference. They're playing great basketball. And I think their backcourt is the closest thing to what Florida had last year. Jaden Bradley, we all saw the game winner against Houston in the or against Iowa State. Braid Burries is a lottery pick. Del Orso off the bench is awesome. Their trio of guards, I think, is the best in college basketball to go along with the bigs. So just feels like their roster is kind of the most complete. And they're going to be tough to beat. But I think Purdue and Gonzaga are going to be some tough outs in that region. I'm more here for Purdue than I am for Gonzaga. It's not that I hate Gonzaga, because we actually talked about them as a team that I liked. I think I even threw them out, or I think you threw them out, and it was my favorite pick of yours in terms of some of these long shot bets when we talked last week, a team who we could see their odds get better over the course of that week. I like Gonzaga, but it feels hard to have a ton of faith in them, because it just is a different looking Gonzaga team than we're used to under Mark Few. But you are right. He wakes up in the Sweet 16. That's when their season starts. Purdue, though,
if they weren't in Arizona's region, I would be coming on here like I was actually prepared before when I was thinking about the show tonight, before the bracket was revealed. I was prepared to be making a case to you for Purdue. If they had been with any of the other 1 seeds, I would be. Arizona is the one that it's hard for me to get there. But I love, PJ, love teams that were really good in terms of the preseason expectations. We know there's talent. We know there's continuity. Like you said, there's so much experience on this team. They're legitimate star players. And then they have a down year, but there's not like a particular reason of, oh, this guy got hurt and that's why it was a down year. Or this thing, fundamentally changed and that's why it's a down year. It was just kind of a disappointing season. And yet their disappointing season is they're the 8th best team in KenPom, the number 1 offense in KenPom, and still have this team intact. Like, if that's your really disappointing year and you're now getting hot, that's a team that I normally love and am all over. If again, Arizona is the boogeyman in this region that I just can't get past, but I do like Purdue. I know you said you think you like, you're maybe higher on them than me. I want to be clear. I do like Purdue quite a bit and would be more excited if they were in a different region.
What makes it tough too is, by now people that follow college basketball know about all these trends, the KenPom stuff and like the week 6 AP poll and all these sorts of things. And Duke, Arizona, and Michigan are like the only 3 that kind of fit like all the criteria. So your champion's probably coming from one of those 3. You and I, kind of sounds like we're aligned on Michigan and Duke maybe not winning the title. So it kind of just leaves Arizona left. And that's why it's
like our championship pick by default almost.
Exactly. So I think the way, Worm, that a lot of people are going to view the East, where it's like a lot of great coaches, a lot of teams with high upside, but Duke's in there, so I don't like them, is how we kind of view the West, where it's like, I like Purdue, I like Gonzaga, it's just they're in the region with Arizona, so I can't take them.
Yeah. If I force you to pick one of the teams, not one of those 3, Gonzaga, Purdue, Arizona, you don't even need to give me a full explanation, but it's just, I force you to pick one shooting from the hip. Who are you picking?
It would be Arkansas. I just because Acuff.
Acuff just goes absolutely nuclear. Would it shock anybody?
You got a Hall of Fame head coach with a lottery pick point guard, best point guard in college basketball. That's a good combo. They just won the SEC tournament, so they get hot. Because look, I think they'll beat Hawaii, and I think they'll beat High Point, who I think is going to upset Wisconsin. So, 1 game, winner take all against Arizona. I like Arizona in that game, but would it shock anybody if Arkansas just goes nuts and wins? Absolutely not.
Yeah. And again, we didn't really talk about BYU, but the other probable number 1 pick here, Debonsa, is awesome. And,
yes.
It's harder for when you're not like a point. You always think of like, who's the guy who drags his team on a Final Four run unexpectedly. It's always a point guard. So it feels a little different with AJ. But, that dude is a monster. As a Wizards fan, I hope they get him in the draft this year. Like, I love AJ. So even though they're not going to be Gonzaga, even if they even get there. But he's a fun talent to watch. Let's go to the Midwest here, PJ. This is Michigan's region. Iowa State is here. Virginia is here. Your Alabama team is here. Texas Tech, we mentioned, obviously, without JT Toppin. Tennessee is the 6th seed. Kentucky's also in this region. St. Louis and Georgia is the 8-9 game. Santa Clara's in this region. This feels to me like if Arizona was in this region, I would be like betting the mortgage on them. I don't think this is a particularly strong region. It happens to coincide with the 1 seed I feel worst about. And you and I have talked about why we are maybe feeling not so great about Michigan. But I don't see a ton of very obvious, no offense to the Crimson Tide. I don't see a ton of very obvious teams. I like Iowa State, but it just doesn't, all the 2 seeds are good, right? It's not like you're going to absolutely hate any of them. It's just not my favorite kind of group of competitors for Michigan. So I'm kind of fading Michigan just more in terms of how I feel about the Wolverines, not in terms of how I feel about the region.
Agreed. I think this sets up really nicely for Michigan. I got no concerns about Georgia or St. Louis taking them out in round 1. If they do get Texas Tech in the Sweet 16 without Toppin dealing with that front line, it's going to be a nightmare. As an Alabama fan, I can tell you Michigan is a nightmare matchup because they cannot beat anybody with a good front court. And, here's Landenborg, Mara, Morez Johnson. So that would be a nightmare. I think Michigan, you can just put them all the way to the Elite Eight. The bottom half of the region's interesting with Iowa State and Virginia, two teams I do like. I think Virginia could get past Iowa State. I think a lot of people are going to have 1 versus 2 in this region. Ryan Odom's a heck of a coach, man. And I think Virginia, they went 29-5 this season, which I think is going to surprise like a lot of people. It's a heck of a team. And again, just like well balanced, they don't really have like any lottery picks. They don't have any of these stud freshmen, but they're just really good. They're well coached. And you talked about how you love betting on teams in the tournament that were really highly coveted coming into the season. I like fading teams in the tournament that really look good in their conference tournament. And that's what Iowa State looked like, where, it's kind of like, it felt like going into the Big 12 tournament, Worm. If we didn't have the Big 12 tournament, the brackets were coming out and Iowa State was the 2 seed, nobody would be interested, right? But you watch them dismantle Texas Tech. You watch them go toe-to-toe with Arizona, and now the bracket comes out, and I bet a lot of people are thinking, if I want to get different and not pick Michigan, I think Iowa State's going to be my pick, right? I think that's the team I want to, and I love kind of fading that thought process, that logic. Otzelberger's never been in the Elite Eight either. His teams kind of flame out in the Sweet 16, so I think that's going to be a really good game. I think Virginia is going to beat them, so I got Michigan, Virginia, Elite Eight. And again, I think they're Auburn, man, where it's like Auburn's region last year. Like I wanted to fade them, but there was nobody in that region that I'm like, I don't think any of these teams are going to beat them. And I feel that way about Michigan, where I want to fade them. I want to pick them to get upset. I want to pick them not to make the Final Four. I just don't think these are the teams to do it with. So I got them advancing to Indy.
Yeah, I as we are talking through this, I think it's very likely that I'm just gonna have Arizona beating them in the Final Four. Like that is just like I can almost write that in now because I like Arizona so much, and I don't like Michigan, but I don't know who I would put ahead of them. So like I just think they're gonna get there. I also think that Michigan is the 1 seed that is going to be the most heavily faded by the public. Is just my guess, and so maybe kind of fading the fade, and having them get past them. You talked about like not liking the Big Ten. Like I know the ACC usually does well in the tournament, but like it's not a good conference. Like I know UVA is a good team, and we're legally obligated when talking about March Madness to mention that Ryan Odom was the coach of UMBC, right? The greatest upset in history. So he's a good coach and it's a good team, but it's not like they've been outside of the Duke games, like have faced a ton of high level competition. In the last few months, and you already hit on Iowa State. Yeah, I'm just like Bama has a talent to outshoot anybody, but like you have been talking about, it's a nightmare matchup when they face Michigan, and it's hard to imagine them facing anybody but Michigan in the Sweet 16. So yeah, I'm like Tennessee's got some talent. I talked about them a little in the conference tournament preview, but I'm not picking them to win multiple games. I want to talk myself into it, and I'm just struggling to. So it does kind of feel like it's Michigan.
Tennessee is interesting because I do like their backcourt. I mean, we obviously know Jacoby Gillespie, and I think he's a very good player. Nate Ament's a lottery pick. I like his game a lot. But it's a Rick Barnes team.
I was going to say, talk about coaching.
Trying to bet his teams in the tournament, it's like, are you going to get 75 points out of Tennessee this game, or are you going to get 55? Like, which Tennessee team are you going to get? So could they upset Virginia? Absolutely. Tennessee's one of the best rebounding teams in the country. They're the best offensive rebounding team in the country. Like, that game will be a war for Virginia. And I think that's how they beat teams in March, especially in the tournament, is their physicality really wears on people. And when you have a backcourt as good as Gillespie and Ament, you can beat some people. So I can see Tennessee making an Elite Eight run problem is I think one of those offensive duds are coming, one of those stinkers. Like, I mean, that Auburn game, they were struggling in the first half, but Auburn's just not any good, so they came back. The Vanderbilt game, they couldn't shoot. It's just like, it just feels like same old Tennessee. I can't do it. So I think Virginia gets by them. I would understand anybody that wants to take Iowa State to go to the Elite Eight. Makes sense. I don't know, man. Iowa State's it's the same kind of feel with Tennessee. Like, you're just like, are you going to get 80 out of the Cyclones? Are you going to get 55? Like, that offensive stinker is coming.
But I think there's a pretty reasonable chance that is the Sweet 16 matchup. So one of them's getting to the Elite Eight if that plays out that way. Like, yeah. Virginia is my least favorite 3, and Tennessee is my favorite 6. So
I would agree.
I would agree. I think I will probably have that upset because I definitely think Tennessee will beat SMU or Miami. So yeah. But then it's like, but I don't want to pick them to make the Elite Eight because it just feels like a bridge too far. But last thing, just like I think Akron's gonna be a really popular 12/5 pick. I mean, those are always whatever you already mentioned. High Point is one you like there, but the 12/5 is what everybody always looks at. I don't think we see it happening with St. John's. You mentioned seeing it happening with High Point. Any interest in kind of going against the narrative of like, well, we should pick Akron because Tech doesn't have Toppin? Like, do you think is that a smart play? Or do you think Tech will still pull it out?
No, I mean, look, a theme of this preview pod has been conferences, and it's been well talked about how bad the MAC is. That's why at 31-0, Miami of Ohio was a discussion of whether they get in. Akron, far away the best team in that league from a metric standpoint. But even they struggled. Worm, all 3 of those games in the MAC tournament, they were trailing. They struggled. They had to come back and win all those games. So now you got to face a team from the best league in college basketball, even though they're without Toppin. And Texas Tech's a funny team. Like, they're the kind of team that could always get upset because of the 3-point variance. But I think against Akron, a team that wants to play fast, that wants to score, 3rd straight year we've seen John Gross's team in the tournament. They haven't put up too much of a fight in these games. So I just think Texas Tech is going to be too much. Nowadays with how popular sports betting is and how popular March Madness is and all these sorts of things, it's usually like that super, super popular upset just doesn't really happen anymore. And like you said, I think this is going to be one of the more popular ones.
We'll do one more region breakdown here for the South and then run through some just rapid fire superlatives for the tournament and get out of here. Florida, the defending champions, are the 1 seed in the South. They were the 4th 1 seed last year too, right? It was the same lower left section of the bracket as I recall. Another 1 seed, Houston, the 2 seed. So would be a very interesting rematch there. Illinois, great offense, is the 3 seed. Nebraska, the 4, have never won a tournament game. Vanderbilt, possibly underseeded, is the 5. And, of course, they just beat Florida in really impressive fashion. Carolina, without Caleb Wilson, is the 6. You got St. Mary's in here. Clemson, Iowa is the 8-9. A&M is in this region as well. To what degree are you scared off by Florida getting blown out in the SEC tournament? Because this is a team that was starting to feel sort of similar to last year where they just got so much momentum and on such a roll that there was this air of inevitability. It wasn't quite like those UConn, teams that won every tournament game by, double-digit points or anything like that. But it felt bored, even though there were closer games. It felt really unlikely. Like, it was hard to imagine Florida losing last year. They were starting to have a similar feel, and then they get blown out against against Vanderbilt in the conference tournament. So, does that scare you off? And if it does, where are you pivoting in this region?
I mean, it has to scare you a little, I think. My opinion of Florida, I was probably going to look to fade them coming into the tournament even before the SEC tournament started. This was a team that struggled in the non-conference earlier in the year. Now, again, they brought in a completely new backcourt with Boogie Flan and Xavier Lee. They had to figure that out. And Todd Golden, one of the best young coaches we have in college basketball, has figured that out for sure. But yeah, the Gators of all the 1 seeds were definitely the one I was looking to fade. And I think getting out of SEC play was actually going to hurt them because Worm, as great as that team was last year, and even though they ended up winning the national championship, they could have easily lost 4 of the 6 games that they won. UConn had them in the round of 32.
Exactly. Texas, like it felt inevitable, but like they were close games, right? It wasn't a lot of blowouts. They had the momentum to keep winning at the end. And part of that is Golden being a good coach. But yeah, sorry, I cut you off.
No, all good. So they could have lost to UConn in the round of 32, could have lost to Texas Tech in the Elite Eight, could have lost to Auburn in the Final Four, and Houston in the title game. They didn't because they had a guy named Walter Clayton.
Yeah.
That role that they've been going on in SEC play, they've won like every game by double digits. They haven't had to play a close game. So we haven't had to see any of those guards take over, make clutch shots down the stretch. We're gonna have to see that. We're gonna have to see that in March Madness, and I think that's where the downfall is going to be from Florida. As terrific as that front court is, as great as they were last year, I mean, they played in a lot of close games, but because of those guards in Clayton, they found ways to win. They just don't have that same backcourt this year, so that's why I'm looking to fade Florida this year. But again, the problem, I think this is the weakest region, Worm. I think the South is the weakest by far.
I mean, just Nebraska as the 4 seed alone. Like I will be, my jaw will be on the floor if you come in here and tell me Nebraska is your pick to make the Final Four here. So if you're fading Florida and Nebraska they've never won a tournament game, does that mean like Illinois Houston is essentially the championship game of this region if those two end up playing? Like I'm just not even sure who you want to come in here. Like Vanderbilt did just beat Florida, but I don't expect you to make the case for them. So like, is it just whoever you like more of, Houston's defense versus Illinois' offense? I mean, you know me, PJ, from group texts with you, me, and our friend Joe Malfa. You know how I feel about Brad Underwood. I will be very happy to fade him in a tournament setting, which basically just leaves Houston, who, similar to Duke, is kind of just a worse version of the team last year. They're still very good, but not quite as good as what they were last year. So like, for me, I guess I'll just go first here. Like my gut reaction is to go with Houston in this region. If I am getting scared off of Florida, I could see myself by the time we get to Thursday tip-offs going back to Florida and just putting faith in defending champs. But if I get scared off of them, I feel like it's Houston.
I agree.
Okay.
And Houston was the team that I was kind of looking to fade too, but I mean, you said it, like Nebraska, come on. I mean, what are we doing? Illinois, I am so out on. Yes, that offense is terrific. Worm, they are the worst team in college basketball. Dead last, the worst in forcing turnovers per game. They force like 7 a game. So when you're in a one and done setting and, you're playing for your season 40 minutes and you can't force any turnovers and get extra possessions, that's a big deal. Your offense is great, but there are going to be some games when it's not, and you got to find a way to win games other ways. And I don't trust them to do that. So I think VCU has a chance to go to the Sweet 16. That's a tricky game. I think VCU is going to be a very popular upset because of the Caleb Wilson injury. That's a tough game. That's a tough game. But I think the winner of that game is going to the Sweet 16. I think the winner of VCU Carolina beats Illinois. I'm going to take a flyer on a team to make a Final Four that nobody is going to talk about. Nobody's talking about this team as a sleeper. But maybe I can sell you a little bit on the St. Mary's Gales.
I was just going to say, I don't even know which team you're about to say.
So St. Mary's is the number 1 free throw shooting team in college basketball. They're number 13th in 3-point percentage. They're top 5 in rebounding, and they're top 20, according to KenPom, in defense. I mean, that checks a lot of boxes. You shoot free throws well, you shoot threes well, you rebound well, you play defense well. Because Randy Bennett and the Gales have not had much success in the tournament, nobody thinks anything of it. I don't know what the updated odds are. I know before the tournament started, because I had my eye on them, they were 100-1 to make the Final Four. But the way that this region breaks, if they're able to beat Houston, that plays a very similar style to them, where it's at a slow pace, 2 defensive teams. If Houston has an off shooting night and St. Mary's is able to shoot the ball well, wouldn't shock me if they upset them. If they upset Houston, then all of a sudden we got a shot. Because again, I'm not high on Illinois. Carolina's got the Wilson injury. VCU, good 11 seed, but I think St. Mary's takes care of business. Got Nebraska's the 4, and then Vandy, Florida towards the top. So I think the Gators are going to go to the Elite Eight. I don't think Vandy's going to beat them again. And I think that's the team they end up matching with in the Sweet 16. But St. Mary's, again, nobody's talking about them. And I didn't even consider them. But I was looking at certain stats the other day, and I was looking at free throw percentage, and I saw St. Mary's was number 1. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize they shot 81% from the line. Then I was looking at 3-point percentage, and I'm like, wow, St. Mary's is 13. And it's just like they were towards the top of all these categories. So I kind of think they're intriguing because, again, you and I are in a similar boat where we like Houston. We don't love them, but just because of this region, we're kind of forced to probably pick them. Nobody is picking St. Mary's, Worm. So it's a long shot for a reason, but they do a lot of things really well.
You already answered the question I was going to ask, which is because I think it's a really interesting case that you made for everything except the Houston part of it. And I was going to ask basically but can they beat Houston, playing a similar style? It's an interesting case for how it could happen. I mean, at the end of the day, let me ask you this just philosophically while we're talking about these matchups. Do you want to be the guy who has a pick in your Final Four that makes people really raise their eyebrows? Or do you want to make the reasonable fades? Instead of taking the 1, I'll take the 3, but I'm not going to go so far as to pick a 7 seed to make it. How do you approach trying to differentiate in a large pool?
I'm always the guy that wants to pick the things that nobody else does and hope that it turns out to be right.
Yeah.
I never want to be the guy that picks all the ones. I never want to be the guy that just goes all chalk. I want to try and pick the upsets and see where they're coming. And you know what? If it doesn't happen and we just get 1 versus 2 all over the place in the Elite Eight and we get all 1 seeds in the Final Four, then I'll lose my bracket pool, and so be it. But
and you'll enjoy the Final Four because that'll be a really fun weekend of basketball.
That's exactly right. So I definitely like having a little bit more fun with my brackets. I like picking upsets. I mean, we're all rooting for chaos at the end of the day to begin with, unless it's involving our teams that we're rooting for. So I know, but it is the tough balance when filling out a bracket of what are the stuff that you genuinely believe is going to happen versus how different are you going to be from everybody else because people are going to have similar things. Even just talking with you and filling out our bracket, there are going to be so many people that have the combo of Michigan, Arizona, Houston, Duke, Michigan, Arizona, Houston, UConn, right? I mean, Purdue, Michigan, it's all going to be the same. And it's never that way. Even last year when it was all 4 1 seeds, wasn't popular because it was only the second time it ever happened. So it's tough, but I think it shapes up really well for Houston. I think the South is the weakest region.
Let me make remind people of this stat on Brad Underwood before we get off this region. He has outperformed his seed 1 time in the NCAA tournament as the coach of Illinois. And it was when he was a 3 seed who made the Elite Eight. They beat Iowa State by 3 points a couple of years ago. Was the 2 seed in the region. So a 3 seed making the Elite Eight is not that crazy. Technically, it's outperforming the seed. It's the only time it's happened. His other 4 tournament appearances in Illinois or at Illinois, and again, not again, but just he's only made 5 tournaments because COVID was one of those years, so there would have been a 6th in there. Didn't get the chance, but those other 5 Elite Eight once has not gotten to the second round in any of those other times, or excuse me, the second weekend. Any of those other times, it's been round 2 exits right and left. So that was a really long-winded way of me saying he has not performed in March, and I have been fading him pretty much every year in the tournament, and it's worked out in my favor. But it's a fun offense. Wagler is really good. It's a weak region. They're actually 7th on KenPom this year. They're higher ranked on KenPom than Purdue, for example, than UConn, for example. So they're not a bad team, but he's been a regular season merchant in the past, and I don't watch this team and think, oh, this is the year it's going to be different and he's going to suddenly become. They always say coaches can't win in March until they do. I just don't feel like this is that team for Underwood.
I'm totally with you. And back to Nebraska real quick for everybody listening. How can you not bet Troy in the first round? You're getting 13 and a half points against a team that has never, ever won a tournament game.
It feels mean to...
I mean, if Nebraska wins by 15 to 20 points, tip the cap, job well done. I just don't think they're going to make it easy, man. Do you remember when Northwestern, and it was a lot different, they were playing in an 8-9 game against Vandy, but do you remember how stressful that game was? Yes. How it came down to the wire? The kid on Vandy, they had the lead, and he actually fouled with like 10 seconds left, not realizing either the game was tied or they had a 1-point lead. So that game came right down the wire. I mean, when you've been playing basketball for that long, you haven't won a tournament game, I have a hard time believing you're going to win by like 15 points. So I will definitely be on Troy plus the points in that game.
You know, if that game is at all close, like there's going to be a lot of clenched, dirt. Like the pressure will be on. And this is a team, like, obviously they started 20-0. They're 6-6 in their last 12. Now, 4 of those 6 have come against Michigan, Illinois, and Purdue. This is good teams, but it's not like they have been, finishing the season strong here after their hot start. So yeah, I almost want to bet them just because I know everybody will be betting against them and just so strictly fade that. Just let everybody know, you and I are going to be doing a lot of these shows throughout March, including some live shows on Twitch. You can get your college basketball betting edge live, joining PJ and myself this Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern on the Betting Pros YouTube channel at youtube.com/bettingpros. I believe it is also on Twitch, is my understanding. Maybe they switched it to YouTube, and I'm not sure about that. The read does say YouTube. So we'll go with YouTube for now, and we'll double check that and be sure to let everybody know throughout the week where to find us. But check out the YouTube channel and or Twitch for NCAA tournament picks and betting breakdowns. That's going to be Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern ahead of the second round. And we're going to do that again the following week, time to be determined later as well for the Elite Eight. All right, PJ, let's go through some just kind of rapid fire general questions I wanted to hit on here before we get out of here now that we've done the region breakdowns. Who would you say is your favorite dark horse that you can sort of paint a picture of their path to the Final Four? A team that, we just talked about all the teams that everybody's going to be picking. A team that not everybody's going to be picking that you could make a case for the Final Four. You did already talk about St. Mary's, so give me another one.
Yeah, St. Mary's. I mean, we talked about St. John's. I think even though they are coached by Rick Pitino, because they're in Duke's region, I don't think a lot of people are going to pick them. And I think their path really sets up good for them. Northern Iowa, that line's already been bet up from 9.5 to 11.5. The Panthers play at one of the slowest paces. They're a good defense, but going up against those guards, man. And I just think that's tough. And then, Pitino formulating a game plan for Darren Peterson in Kansas, who doesn't really have a traditional point guard. I think that's a good matchup. Getting Duke potentially without Caleb Foster and their point guard, I think is good. I also talked about how TCU could make a run. So those would probably be my 2 dark horses, where I think there is a chance that Duke could go down earlier, a lot earlier than people think, and we could get some chaos in that East region. We talked about liking Michigan. We talked about liking Arizona. It's really tough for me to see a dark horse making it out of that region. And we just talked about the South and how there really isn't anybody that we really kind of like outside of Houston all that much. So if you were looking for dark horses, I think TCU, St. John's probably be my 2 picks.
I think St. John's might be my genuine pick. Not like just trying to paint a case for a dark horse. I think I might go with St. John's. I want to think about that more. Mm-hmm. Give me a team that not enough people are talking about right now.
I think it's Gonzaga. Again, I hate that they're in Arizona's region, but the offense defense thing is so fascinating to me. It's like Lincoln Riley is coaching USC and he's got a better defensive team than offense. Like, you know what I mean? Like that, that's what it's like.
That's a great comp for it.
Truly. So imagine that. Imagine watching a Lincoln Riley team and they're elite on defense. They're still good offensively, but they're better defensively. And it's like, what do I do with this? So I think you combine that to the fact that they're one of the oldest teams in college basketball. Tyon Grant-Foster's been in college for a long time. Graham Ike's been there a while. And, Mark Few for the last decade plus has had all these superstar guards and NBA players, and they really don't just have that this year. So the Zags, I think, aren't getting talked about enough, and I think they're so fascinating because it's not the flashy, sexy Gonzaga team, but it's a different kind of Zags team. And that makes it interesting. And Worm, as we know, normally in sports, the teacher usually beats the student. So even though Tommy Lloyd has the better team, and he's a heck of a coach in his own right, there could be a chance that maybe Gonzaga could get to the Final Four. So I think people are sleeping on the Zags. I don't think they're talking about them enough.
Give me some players who you think can make a name for themselves this month. It doesn't have to be like a totally out of the blue, obscure name nobody's heard of, but somebody who will kind of elevate themselves in the public conscious. They can be a star that kind of takes that step into superstardom. It can be an obscure name who sort of becomes a household name. It doesn't have to be the random guy who hits a bunch of 3-pointers for a mid-major to upset the Power 5 school, but whoever you think is going to make a name for themselves this month.
So, yeah, look, again, if St. Mary's potentially makes a run, I think Mikey Lewis is a guy that I would watch. It's a different guard than St. Mary's has really had in the past. They just kind of get their guards that are fundamentally sound players. They run the offense. They play good defense, but he's kind of got some one-on-one game to him. He's got some wiggle to him. He can really shoot, and I think that's why St. Mary's, their offense has been elevated, as we were just talking about, to previous years. So I think Mikey Lewis on St. Mary's would be a guy to potentially watch. Going through the teams here, seeing if there are anybody else on any of these other teams I think could make some noise. I mean, again, like Texas Tech, a lot of people have, I'm sure, watched this team and know of him, but Christian Anderson is one of my favorite point guards in the country. And without Toppin, if they're able to go on a run and beat some of these good teams in front of them, it's going to be because of him and because he's just going on a Walter Clayton-like run and making big shots and winning these games at the end for Texas Tech. So Christian Anderson, if you haven't watched much college basketball, that is a guy that I would keep an eye on. Another guy potentially, I like TCU to beat Ohio State, but if the Buckeyes get past TCU and maybe they're the team to upset Duke, Bruce Thornton's a terrific guard for Ohio State as well. An upperclassman, all this talk about all these great freshman guards, but he's one of the really good upperclassman guards that we have in college basketball. So he's another guy that I would watch. Those 3 guards are probably the ones that stand out to me.
Give me your most likely Cinderella, and I'll let you define Cinderella however you'd like. It can be a really low seed that just makes a Sweet 16. It can be a kind of low seed that makes a Final Four. However you want to define it, give me your most likely Cinderella.
Most likely Cinderella, I'll give you 2. I think South Florida, the 11 seed, or High Point, the 12 seed, would be 2 teams that I look at because I like their path to potentially get to the second weekend. South Florida, Louisville, again, they have not been able to beat a good team all year. They're one of the most overrated teams in the country. All this hype. They do run an exciting offense. They shoot a lot of threes, but they just don't beat good teams. South Florida, their head coach, Brian Hodgson, comes from the Nate Oates coaching tree at Alabama. So when you watch the Bulls play, it's a lot like when you watch Alabama play. Fast tempo, a lot of threes, but they're good defensively. They're rugged, they're tough, and that's going to be a heck of a game. And then I think they got a good shot at beating Michigan State too. High Point, I think, is a terrible matchup for Wisconsin. A lot of people have been talking about how the Badgers are one of these teams, can lose in the first round, make the Final Four, which is true. This is a bad matchup for them with High Point as a 12. The Panthers are one of the best mid-major offensive teams in the country that shoot a lot of threes, make a lot of threes, and they're also one of the best defenses in the country at forcing turnovers. So when you're going up against those guards, Boyd and Blackwell in Wisconsin, they got some guys on the perimeter that can make life tough for them, pressure them, and force them into some turnovers. So, and then again, if High Point gets past Wisconsin, you're dealing with Acuff. So they can throw some different guys at him that even though you can't stop Acuff, they'll definitely try and tear him out as much as they can, wear him out. So those would be the 2 Cinderellas I'd look at.
Going back to South Florida real quick, Hodgson is going to be coaching at a bigger school very soon. I think he's a rising
Syracuse
star.
Should pick up the phone as soon as they lose. They
absolutely should.
Yeah.
If they know what they're doing, which recent history tells us maybe they don't. I'm glad you picked some double-digit seeds too, because like we always see, there's a double-digit seed in the Sweet 16. It happens like clockwork. All right, we'll get out of here on gut reaction Final Four picks. We've been kind of talking about it, but we're not beholden to these. We could change it between now and Thursday, but on Sunday night as we record this, you're shooting from the hip. Just like I said, kind of gut reaction Final Four picks. I'll give you mine first. I'm going to go St. John's in the East. I am going to go Arizona in the West. The Midwest is probably my least favorite one to pick. I don't want to take Michigan, but I kind of feel forced to because I can't take Virginia, and you talked me out of Iowa State, so I'll say Michigan, and then Houston, which is too chalky, but I guess St. John's is a little bit different. I'll go St. John's and Houston, and then Arizona and Michigan as my gut check Final Four here. What do you got?
I got Arizona, Michigan, Houston, and UConn. So we're very alike.
Same
there.
3 teams plus a Big East team.
I hate it, but it's like, okay, so then do I put St. Mary's there? Like, am I really like? No, I'm not going to do that. Like, do I want to put Virginia and Iowa State? I really don't. So I know it's hard. A lot of people are going to have the same kind of Final Four teams. It sucks.
Who's the team in that Final Four scenario that you're most scared that like they're going to burn you for leaving them off? Because, like, I feel like Florida, I mean, it could be Duke, just be like, hey, this is the best team in the country.
Sure.
It could be Florida, like, hey, defending champs who were really hot right up until one game where Vanderbilt shot like crazy. Who scares you most?
Gonzaga, Purdue. Gonzaga. I think those.
Purdue's a great call. Purdue would be in my Final Four if they weren't in Arizona's region. I'll tell you that right now.
So I'm going to have Arizona. I'm trying to figure out, do I have Arizona on my bracket but bet a future on Gonzaga and Purdue to make the Final Four? Or do I pick Purdue and Gonzaga to go to the Final Four and bet a future on Arizona? Because it's like you get the worst odds on Arizona and not as many people in your bracket are going to have Purdue and Gonzaga, right? Or do you put Arizona in there and get the better odds with Purdue and Gonzaga? I think that's how I'm probably going to end up playing it. I tell you, Worm, though, we couldn't have Gonzaga in like the South region. We couldn't have Purdue in like the Midwest region. Like that's what we
put
need.
Purdue in the South and Gonzaga in the Midwest. This is a very different conversation.
Feeling better.
Yeah.
But those are the two.
All right, we'll go ahead and wrap up there. Like I said, a whole lot more coming. Largely from here, it will be more betting focused. We wanted to do kind of a bracket reaction here for Sunday night, have some fun with everybody. If you want to get more of these shows, largely will be over on the Betting Pros feed. So be sure to be following us there if you are interested, both on YouTube and on the audio side. Be sure to check out PJ also with Game Day Garage and Hoops in 5 with PJ Glasser. PJ, thank you so much for coming on. I know it's a late night for you, but it's a fun night, right? You're just talking college hoops. What's better than that? So I appreciate you making the time.
Thanks, Worm, for having me. Always good time, my friend. I'll talk to you again. Talk to you again soon.
We'll talk soon. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.